It's not even important, it's just a, yeah. So that's, yep.
Jim, am I just reading everything?
Yeah, all these right here, yeah.
Am I just reading everything?
Yeah,
Those are signed.
yes, we'll go through that.
The appeal
Is it
also,
two there or one?
and the summary cases?
Okay.
Want to just deal with that before I read the rest of the stuff?
We'll do the roll call. Open the-
I'll get it, I'll grab it. It's upstairs. It was too many to send, that's why it's in a shared folder. It's too many to send.
Or do you want to send a link to me too? So I
They weren't sent a link, it was too big. Oh, it's in the shared folder. It didn't, well, Rita put it in a shared folder, but only people who have access to the shared folder. Like,
can I get access to the shirt?
I don't know, I don't know honestly.
I guess it reminds me.
It's a big, thick white binder, I'll bring it down for you.
You know, why don't we don't get it tonight?
Okay.
I'll see, because if I get access to it electronically, it's easier.
Yeah, I mean, because Rita couldn't even send it to me. Yeah. April 21st.
They're all signed, so you can just tell us in terms.
The draft minutes for the special zoning board meeting are in there too. It's not on the agenda.
So I submitted where it started correct.
That one.
I think you give those to text message.
She took the other one. All right, doesn't make any difference. What's going on here? How are you, Mr. Miller? Good.
Everyone ready? Ready up here? Is you still there?
What's that? What's that?
Good?
Yeah.
Mr. Kane? Good? Call the meeting to order. First order of business is roll call and adoption of minutes from the 26th and the December 17th meeting.
Andy Bacon? Here. Eric Curtin? Here. Olin Gambrell?
Here.
Jim Miller?
Here.
Tom Heaney? Here. Chris Souza? Here. And Tom Silvera?
Here.
I'd like a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from November 26th.
Motion to adopt said meeting minutes.
Made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Next, I need a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from the special meeting that we held on the 17th.
Motion to adopt minutes from the meeting on the 17th.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0. Next order of business is in April, our regular scheduled meeting was to be April 28th. There's an election that day and we do not have the room. So I'd like to move the meeting to the 21st of April. Do we need a vote on that or it's just procedural, correct?
It's just procedural.
Yep.
Once you, so just announce that. And then that's
So our meeting in April will be April 21st, not the 28th. Next order of business is I'm gonna open, the zoning board sits when there's an issue with the planning board as the planning board of appeal. Tonight, we're gonna open the case, but to be clear, it's only for scheduling tonight. So with that, I'm gonna open the planning board of appeals. We're now sitting as the Board of Appeals. Mr. Curtin, could you read the case?
Sure, it's the appeal of Eugene Goldstein by his attorney David Martland from the decision of the planning board dated October 18, 2019, and recorded on October 22nd, 2019, which denied the pending application for combined preliminary and final plan approval for a proposed 8-lot major subdivision of property fronting on Prospect Avenue. Said real estate is located approximately a third of a mile to the east of the intersection of Prospect and Aquidneck Avenue, and further identified as Lot 66A and Tax Assessor's Plat 121 Northwest.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a conversation with Attorney Martland earlier this week, and we have agreed on a briefing schedule for this case. He's agreed that the appellant they will file their brief within 30 days, and then the town, any other interested parties would file their briefs within 21 days thereafter. So my suggestion would be, perhaps just for control purposes, to continue this matter. So we'll set that as a briefing schedule and continue the matter to the March.
He requested March 24th.
The March 24th meeting.
Okay, so the Goldstein will have their appeal in 30 days?
They'll file their brief within
Brief.
30 days, and then the town, any other interested parties would file their briefs 21 days thereafter.
51 days, and that gives us time to get in, plenty of time to get into the March meeting.
Correct.
Is there
And
any,
and assuming that everything is filed at that point in time, assuming that the board's in agreement, there'd be argument at that March meeting.
did Attorney Martland make any progress on the transcript that he was going to
My understanding is he did receive the written transcript of the planning board hearings, that he's providing that to Mr. Kane, and then once Mr. Kane has it, he will transmit it to all of you.
Okay, 'cause I know.
So at that point, you should have the full record.
Okay, so we're going to continue the Planning Board of Appeal until the March 24th meeting. And it'll be at the top of the docket, correct?
Excuse me?
It'll be placed first in the docket.
That's at the discretion of the board, but that makes sense.
Do we need a motion to adjourn, Mr. Kane? Mr. Regan? No? Okay, so if you're here for the Planning Board of Appeal, you get an early night. As Mr. Regan said, it'll be 51 days before we have all the material in, so we will be ready to go forward on March 24th, and it will be at the top of the meeting. Yes? Can you come up to the mic?
Christine Fagan, 5 Tony Lynn Terrace. I was just wondering about the transcript. Would the transcript be available to public?
Once we receive it, it's public record, so it'll become part of the record.
Yes. The short answer, yes.
Okay.
You're also welcome to watch that's not a recorded, or is it recorded?
It's,
Those were recorded. I believe Ms. Fig might have even been there at the time, but
Right.
the recordings are available online, and we should have the written transcript sometime this week.
yeah, I think that's easier to work with, but thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you. So we're going to close the Planning Board of Appeal. Looking forward to seeing everyone in March. And with that, we're going to go through our caseload for tonight. What we typically do is we read all the cases through. The first case we're going to read through is a summary case. If there's anyone here to object, we'll put it to the full hearing calendar. Otherwise, a summary case is something that has very minimal requests, so we handle it as a simple vote. So with that, Mr. Curtin, can you read the summary cases?
In total, or we're just briefing them, right?
Yeah, well, let's read the summary case and tell us we can get it out of the way.
Yeah, sure. Petition of Ken and Kristen Robbins for a variance from section 603 and 701 to allow a 12 by 24 in-ground pool with a rear yard setback of 5 feet where 10 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 4 Julia Court and further identified as lot 106K and tax assessor's plat 114.
Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to either speak for or against the petition? Seeing none, we're going to treat that as a summary case. Can I have a motion to accept the case?
I'll make a motion to accept the case.
Motion made, do I have a second? Olin Gambrella, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Now we're going to go through the full hearings, and Mr. Curtin will read just the appellate, and we're going to ask you if you're ready to go forward, or whether you want to
You
continue.
could also name state the address of the property, please.
Yes, we'll do the name and the address.
Sure. Petition of Brian T. Holland and Kerry Holland for 8 Tuckerman Avenue.
Okay?
Petition of Acacia Newport LLC, 32 Acacia Drive, by Jeremiah Lynch.
That petition is currently before the planning board. They've rendered their opinion. Conservation Commission's going to take that up tomorrow night. So that needs to be continued to the regular meeting in February, which would be the 25th.
25th.
2 petitions for Brian Balt, 248 Baltus Ave.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, January 28th.
28.
Regular meeting on the 28th. Yep. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Petition of James Paradise by his attorney Gerard Galvin.
If I could briefly,
Yep.
on a scheduling issue. Good evening, Gerard Galvin for Jim Paradise. This matter is pending before the planning board. It's on the planning board agenda for either development plan review or waivers, which we've applied for from the planning board. We should know after the February meeting whether we can come right in to the zoning board or if it needs to be continued for some additional work in the planning board. But I'll let Mr. Kane know on the scheduling if we could be continued for that purpose.
Okay. Mr. Kane, who decides on whether it gets a full technical review? Or
It's been referred to the planning board for development plan review, and they'll make the determination
On
as to whether
302?
or not, based on the redevelopment status of the property, if it's going to be subject to a full review or not.
We're asking for, based on the context of the application, that they waive some of the more stringent development plan review process and allow us to come to you for the special use permit, and then go through whatever additional technical process we need to if we pass through you guys.
okay. So you want to continue that until?
Well, if we could continue it for 1 month until the February meeting, at that point, I think we'll know whether potentially we can proceed that month or if we're going to be having a longer process at the planning board level.
Okay, we'll continue that to the 24th, the 25th of February.
Thank you very much.
And that's for both the variance and special use, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll,
Yeah, I read it. He's here. That's right. So it's just gonna be the 2.
Mr. Chairman, I have to accuse myself from the first one.
okay. You got your form to fill out? Okay. So that means that who's our second, Mr. Bacon, you'll be voting.
All right. Petition of Brian T. Holland and Kerry Holland by their attorney Gerard Galvin for a variance of section 603, 701, 703, and 802B to allow a shed with a side yard setback of 0.6 feet where 15 feet is required, and a rear yard setback of 2.9 feet where 10 feet is required, resulting in a lot coverage of 33.8% where 25% is allowed. Said real estate is located at 8 Tuckerman Avenue, further identified as lot 125 at Tax Assessor's Plat 116.
Real quick before we get started, Mr. Severa, were you here when this opened? This is the shed that was built, yeah, I believe you were.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Okay, we've got a quorum.
Well, who else can't?
Mr. Souza was here when it opened, and I listed him as here, but he's recused. So
But I'm not voting on it.
What's that?
Mr. Bacon's voting.
Mr. Bacon, were you here for the opening of this?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm just asking.
But no, he was already voting. I need you to vote.
Oh, you need
I
me to
did the
vote?
math. I need your vote.
Okay.
Mr. Gambrell.
Mr.
Gambrell
Gambrell
was not here.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, no.
I wasn't trying to be
No, no.
I just wanted you to make sure that it was right. Okay.
Now you can proceed, Mr. Galvin. I wanted to
Thank
make
you.
sure that we had a quorum.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gerard Galvin from Galvin Law, representing Carrie and Brian Holland. Yes, I'm sorry. As you all may recall, this matter opened in September 24, 2019, and we took testimony, you heard testimony that night from Carrie Holland regarding her family's need for the shed that you see in your application. And we had fairly extensive testimony about the structures that existed in that backyard and the impervious surface, the concrete that existed all across that backyard last year at this time. In that process, and in describing the transition from what that backyard used to look like to what it looks like now with the shed that's in front of you, some concerns were raised by both Mr. Keane and some of the members of the board about potential permitting issues with where that shed currently exists. So we paused the hearing at that point. And since that time, my clients have considered multiple ways to attempt to deal with those concerns that you raised. So we're returning tonight to continue with the application, but to modify our request to increase the setbacks from the eastern property line, which is the rear boundary, and the side property line on the south. And the proposal would be to pull that building into the backyard 5 feet from both the backyard property line and the side yard southerly property line. Our hope is that in amending our proposal in that way, we're addressing some of the concerns that have been raised about access and maintenance around that structure, which I know is a concern, fire safety concerns which were raised, and as well as just pulling it back, which I know is a general theme that you're looking for, having structures off of the property line. So tonight I have Brian Holland here, primarily in case you have any questions for him, because I know you already took substantial testimony about the need for the shed. And I also have Jim Hool here to talk on the criteria for the variance. And in Mr. Hool's report, you'll see a small diagram, but essentially you can visualize it's just pulling that what is in your application, moving it 5 feet in from both sides. But before we get to the testimony, I just want to reiterate a few, I think, important contextual points here. That this backyard was, until very recently, covered in concrete with 2 large garage structures there. The lot coverage at that site was about 56% lot coverage. These applicants undertook these improvements to the property with the intention of creating more green space in their yard and in their neighborhood, while retaining some storage capabilities there. They engage with their neighbors on this. They have letters of support that are in your file, which I tonight will be asking that they be made full exhibits. And as far as we are aware, we've never heard one objection from any neighbor. So in light of all of that context and our efforts tonight, we hope you'll see fit to approve this application. I do have Brian Holland here. What I may do is just hold off on asking for any testimony at this point. I'll make him available for any questions, because we did get through a substantial amount of the rationale for why the family needs this shed. And at this point, I'll bring up Mr. Hool to walk through the criteria. Unless you have any questions at this point you'd like to address the applicant.
I think Mr. Heaney.
Yes,
has a
Mr.
question.
Heaney.
You mentioned that you wanted to move the shed closer onto the property. So 5 feet off of the 2 boundaries in question. I noticed that, I believe it's on a slab, is that correct?
It's
The
actually,
shed is on a slab.
it's actually not on a slab currently. The part of the other permitting issues that Mr. Kane and I discussed following our last meeting, one of those discussions centered on the footing or foundational supports necessary when we move it. And so currently it's just sitting essentially on the ground, and if we're approved and we move it into the yard, the contractor will be communicating with Mr. Kane about the appropriate level of footings or foundation to meet the requirements at that time.
And I wanted to ensure that moved with it, so that was my concern.
That's right, so there's nothing currently there that will need to be deconstructed, be moved
Yeah,
right
I
down.
believe our only issue was with the proximity of the shed to the boundary, so if Mr. Hull's gonna speak to that, that would be great.
Okay, with that, I'll call Mr. Kula up.
This is just procedural. I mean, what we read in as far as the request for the variance is still reflective of the old numbers.
Well, it is, and, you know, my position on this, and I don't know if the solicitor has a different one, but because what we're doing is we're
You're lessening the request.
vastly reducing the request.
The request for relief is less than what they asked for in their application and less than what was advertised. So as a result, it doesn't need to be re-advertised or re-noticed. If they were moving it closer to the fence, it would need to be re-noticed and re-advertised. But since they're increasing the size of the setbacks and decreasing the relief requested, they're fine.
Mr. Hull, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony tonight be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
James Houle, Houle, 198 Union Street, Portsmouth.
Mr. Hull, you've appeared before this board on numerous occasions as a real estate expert, so we're going to recognize you tonight as such.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may approach with Mr. Hull's report.
You may. We're going to mark that Exhibit A.
Yes.
It's actually P4, so this is going to be P5. Sorry, I don't know why I did P's last week, but last month. Because they were frozen, that's why.
Thank you.
All right, now, Mr. Hull, you've prepared this report analyzing a number of things, whether this shed's compatible with the comp plan and whether it meets the criteria for dimensional variance, correct?
That is correct.
And also whether it would impact the neighborhood or the surrounding area, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you describe how you went about your investigation after being retained?
Sure. I reviewed the petition. I went to visit the site, the neighborhood, looked at the applicable zoning code and the comp plan, and then assembled a report prior to appearing here tonight.
Okay. And based on your review, what findings have you made?
Well, I'm just going to go through what I did find. I did not address, just as a clarification, I didn't address anything to do with the permitting process. In my report, I strictly looked at this in terms of the merits of the dimensional variance that were being requested on the property.
Mr. Hull, if I could interrupt for 1 second, just to point to page 5 of the report, it may help provide the members of the board with a bit of a visualization of the shed being pulled off of its property lines.
That's a very good point. The shed, if you can, on that graph, on that aerial or the plat map, you can see that the yellow is the prior size of the building. Those are the footprints that existed for the buildings that had been on site when they purchased, the Hollands purchased the property. And the actual photographs of those two buildings are on page 3 of the report. You can see that there was a covered patio which was in the right-hand corner, and then there was a garage building that was in the left-hand corner, and each of those two buildings have been removed. Now, the way the shed, you can see the photograph of the shed that's also on page 5, but the way the shed is positioned is outlined on top of the yellow in the right-hand corner of the property. So I am not a great artist, but I I superimposed the 5-foot indentation for the shed where the shed will be going. So you can see that it moves over and down into the yard somewhat. Okay? So essentially, the issue is that they need a variance for lot coverage and for the dimensional setback, because the rear sideline, the rear should be 10 feet, and the side should be 15 feet required in the code, and we're 5 feet on both. Now, the shed is currently half a foot off of the sideline setback where 15 foot is required, and it's 2.5 feet, 2.9 feet off of the rear sideline, or rear setback where 10 is required. So it's much more in conformance, and the code really requires a 5-foot separation between this and the shed that's on the other lot next to it on the sideline that is right on the property line. So this allows this to conform with the code by moving it to 5 feet, because it obviously, they were right alongside each other up until this point. So I looked at the merits of the case. Now, they went ahead and did this prior to actually coming in and asking for relief to tear it down and put the new shed for a demolition permit and to put the shed in place. So there's, I am looking strictly at this in the merits of the petition in front of us, which is to cover 33.8% of the lot, whereas that it had been 56.51%. And then to establish the new 5-foot setbacks for the shed, where they had been 0 both on the rear and sideline, on where the side where the shed is being located. So with that in mind, I looked at the the criteria of the variance. The hardship from which the applicant seeks relief is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure. The subject lot contains only about half of the required land area, and then it's an R10 zone. By itself, the dimensions and size of the lot generates the hardship, the situation in which construction of any reasonably sized shed, in addition to the existing footprint of the house, would be over the lot coverage. So basically, it's the size of the lot, which is a pre-existing condition. The hardship is not the result of prior action. You can make the argument that they should have come in here for relief, which is very valid, but the truth of the matter is that the hardship has been all along the actual size of the lot, which is substandard for the area, and would have, as I said a moment ago, would have required relief no matter what. So I really look at the hardship, the underlying hardship, as being the lot size rather than the actions, because the actions actually made it more in conformance than it was before. I know we've had this discussion in the past.
Mr. Houle, would your job have been easier if you came in here when the buildings were still there and you were asking for relief to demolish the buildings and place this shed on it?
There is no question that it would have been. There is no question that these are always difficult situations when the applicant has performed some action. Again, we had this most recently when I was in here. The situation that we had had in the past where the applicant had a conforming lot and went right up to the level, was asking to exceed what lot coverage was, which was, exceeding on a conforming lot when he had already built up to the full coverage. The situation is a little bit different in that, as I said, the hardship really exists by the size of the lot.
Right,
Would I
that would have been the
rather have
argument
been here
initially.
before? I'm sorry.
That would have been your argument if you initially came in.
It certainly would have
Right.
been,
So
yes.
I understand what you're saying, I guess is what I'm trying to.
Okay. I mean, there's no question about it, it's a very, you know, it's an interpretation, but I really believe the hardship is the lot size. So, rather than the action, in this particular case. The granting of the required variances will not alter general characteristics, that's certainly true. There's an aerial that shows how densely populated the area is. We know it's a densely populated area. There are several outbuildings that you can see that are right against the property lines. It certainly would be in conformance with the neighborhood. I also looked at the lot coverages in the neighborhood. You can see the list that I have, and you have on page 8 is the map showing the lots that I actually surveyed. The average, the lot coverage in the area goes from 15% to 49, or 45 rather. The average for the smaller lots under 7,000 square feet is 29. We're at 5,600, so we're much smaller even than the 7,000. We're requesting 33.8%, which is well within the range. It's only slightly above the average for the neighborhood, and that I don't think that it is outrageous. Again, the top end of the range is 45%. The relief to be granted is the least relief. I believe at this point it is the least relief necessary. And in granting the dimensional variance, the hardship would be more than a mere inconvenience. I truly believe at this point it would be more than a mere inconvenience. They have no storage in the house. There's no basement. They need to have some storage on the lot. As I said, almost any lot that they would come in and request relief would be over lot coverage.
Any questions?
I have questions for Gerard, but
Yes.
so how much work was done to the house? Was it gutted? Was it?
Well,
Did you have to get permits to do the work that was done in the house, and did you get demolition permits
there was,
to demolish what was there?
I'll have Brian Holland come up and answer any questions about the house. I know that there was a demolition permit granted for to take down all of those structures in the backyard. And the mistake was, and we've acknowledged it, and at the original hearing, we expressed, this is a situation where we understand something happened that shouldn't have in that order, where there should have been a request made initially. But in the context of what's going on here, they obtained a demolition permit and put a structure up that was vastly smaller than what had existed there. And so they thought that wasn't going to be a problem, and opening up the space and having the neighbors approve it and everything. We know that's not okay. They've been educated thoroughly in this process about that. And this whole effort has been to try to make this right by asking for permission, making concessions that we're hopefully able to make and still meet everybody's needs and address your concerns. There's no question that it would have been an entirely different story if we came in last March. Before the demo, I think it would have been it may even been a summary. I mean, I don't know, it was a slam dunk. And so the order of it has changed that dynamic, but I don't think, it hasn't changed the fact that this is, I think, a much improved lot by virtue of this. It's much improved for the neighborhood. The neighbors are all in support. And we're trying to address the concerns that you've raised at substantial expense. And I know some of that is, it's through their own actions, but this whole process has been in an effort to make this right and do what needs to be done. So we're not hiding from the circumstances that led us here. We're just trying to address it. I know they obtained a demo permit for the outdoor, the garage and the exterior structures there. Mr. Holland, if you have questions about the house, when they upgraded the house, he's here and he can answer that.
I'm good with.
Is that existing this new shed, is that on a foundation or slab on grade, or what is that?
Right now, it's on grade.
It's nothing underneath?
Nothing underneath, it, some gravel maybe.
Yeah, just,
We could swear Mr. Oh, yeah, would you like us to swear Mr. Holland in to answer that question? Are you good?
I'm
Okay,
good.
that's fine. And
We're good.
again, the intention is that if we're approved here and we move it in accordance with what we're suggesting, that the contractor will be working with Mr. Kane on making sure there's appropriate either footings or foundation
Right.
with that.
Because it does look like a slab on grade underneath it now, that's why I asked that
I
question.
think
Yeah, I think
that's
that's-
just the picture that they.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it's just
all
the
right, well,
structure.
it does look like it to me, but that's fine.
So a contractor built this then?
It's an outfit, yeah, a
Shed delivery
shed
service.
delivery guy.
I think we're good.
Lesson learned.
So you hired a contractor.
Well,
Contractor came in, tore down, and got a demolition permit.
let me, why don't I bring Mr. Holland up and answer this?
Mr. Holland, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony tonight be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Brian Holland, 42 Highland Lane, Milton, Massachusetts.
You originally, when you bought the house and you did this work, you hired a contractor, or who pulled the permit?
So, an excavation company pulled the demolition permit and did all the removal of the existing structures, sort of regraded the yard, did some yard work. So they brought it to that point, and then I hired a shed delivery company to deliver the shed.
So at the beginning of this phase, I mean, is that new fence yours too?
So the fence was, there's an existing fence, like fence posting, that's owned by our neighbor, and so I discussed it with her, and we just replaced the, I
You're
guess,
referring to
the
the back?
section.
This new fence, is that yours? Did you do this?
Yes,
Did you pull a permit for that?
no. The fence, I guess, just to be clear, the sections of fence were replaced on existing posts.
Okay. So when you went ahead and decided to make these renovations to your property, you hired a contractor for the demo work.
That's right.
At that particular point in time, did you already hire somebody to build this new shed?
No, after the groundwork was done, I just looked into sheds and called somebody up and hired them.
So what is it, like a company that you just buy and they come by with a flatbed and drop it off?
That's right, yeah, that's right. And this, not that you asked this, but the sections of fence I just replaced myself, so that was not the contractor or the shed company. Just
And
to
you weren't
clarify.
aware of the fact that you needed a permit for that?
Do you need it for repair and maintenance?
He said he left the existing post, so that would be more maintenance than a replacement.
And you were not aware that you needed the permit?
For the shed, I was unaware that I needed the permit.
And Mr. Holland, is that, did part of the rationale or the fact that you were taking down these two huge structures in your backyard and replacing it with a vastly smaller one lead you to that conclusion?
It did, and I think I was driven a little bit by my conversations with my neighbors because they were so far in support of it that I sort of skipped over the fact that it wasn't, it felt like such an improvement, and I was sort of brought them in the loop. I thought that was kind of the crucial part of the process. And again, leaning on this person that was building and delivering the shed, I sort of asked them if they needed anything else, and they said, no, just, we're gonna bring it in a number of sections and, assemble it in place.
And, for what it's worth, we may be looking at that shed company and talking to them after this.
Well, I think you should.
For the lack of direction here, and certainly to make them aware that if you come to Middletown, you gotta be a little bit more upfront with your customers. So, but, right now, we're dealing with this
Right.
situation and trying to do our best to get right with the town, and then we'll deal with that. with them directly. So just so you know, we're not, that is still a possibility of pursuing that, but we're trying to bring this to some closure initially before we go down that path.
Okay, thank you. I think we're good.
Okay. The only other thing that I'd ask is, and you have them all in your application packages, but I just wanted the letters of support. I believe there's 4 letters of support, and I just asked that those be made exhibits,
They
full
are
exhibits for the
part
record.
of the record.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Kane, this is more or less an accessory building, right, in an R10,
That's correct.
on a very small lot.
Yes.
It's an R10 lot that's less than 6,000 square feet. Okay, I think we're good, Mr. Galvin.
Okay, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak either for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Can I have a motion for the,
Before we get started, who's the voting members again?
the voting members tonight are you, Mr. Heaney, myself, Mr. Curtin, and Mr. Bacon. Those are the voting members. So I need a motion and a second.
I make a motion to approve the variance.
I'll second.
Motion made by Tom Heaney, second by Eric Curtin.
Excuse me, he offered an amendment to go 5 foot from the property line, should include that
Yes.
in the motion.
Can I have that amendment?
Yep.
And
I
then-
make a motion to approve the variance with the proviso that the shed is moved 5 feet from the 2 boundaries that were in question, more onto the lot on 8 Tuckerman Avenue.
I will second.
Motion made and second, discussion?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote in favor, I believe that by moving it in the 5 feet, it gives them, it's in a very tight lot, and so by moving it in 5 feet, it gives you room to maintain the shed. And I believe 6 inches or a foot or whatever it was existing is too small for a person to come in and maintain the shed.
Any other discussion? I agree with my colleague. I think that the applicant has done a tremendous rehab to the property, you know, going from 50% lot coverage down to just 33. Lot coverage is a very sensitive subject, but when you're on a lot that's less than 6,000 square feet and it's R10, it's pretty hard to meet the 25%. So I'm going to support the petitioner. I think it's the least relief necessary for the full enjoyment of the property. So with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Galvin.
Thank you all.
Mr. Curtin is going to recuse himself from the next case. As an abutter, did you fill out your paperwork? You're reading. That's why I did it.
Petition of Brian Bulk, owner, for a variance from sections 603, 701, and 803G to allow a 2-story, 30-foot by 30-foot garage with a right side setback of 24.2 feet and a 14-foot setback, 14 by 20-foot second floor with a right side setback of 15.9 feet, where 30 feet is required. And a front yard setback of 33.7 feet, where 40 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 248 Vaucluse and further identified as Lot 21 Alpha on Tax Assessor's Plat 129.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear the testimony tonight will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address for the record.
It's Brian Bulk, 248 Vaucluse Avenue, Middletown.
We're gonna have to read one other thing.
Also, the petition of the owner, Brian Ball, for a special use from Article 16 to allow an accessory family dwelling. Said real estate is located at 248 Vaucluse Avenue and further identified as Lot 21 Alpha on Tax Assessor's Plat 129.
Tell us about your petition, Mr. Bulk.
The first one is, the second floor.
Just, yeah.
A second floor add-on, there's an existing flat roof with a room. The roof needs to be replaced as well as the rest of the house, so I figured I'd, instead of replacing the flat rubber roof, just put a salt box to match the existing roof line, and that's where that 14 by 20, just open area, plan is just to be extra floor space, play area for my future grandkids that are coming soon. The garage apartment area in the back, I'm just myself, so I'm looking to kind of minimize the space that I need. My daughter's starting her family. She has a grandson coming, or she's got a child coming June, so figured let them have the main house, and then if I just had a small area in the back, and that kind of leads to the special use for Article 16. I don't meet the 62 age requirement for the current accessory family, so just looking to kind of do what I have to do to make things work. But just looking to continue, you know, I was born in that house. My father bought it from his aunt. I'm looking to just continue it in the family for the next fourth and fifth generation that are there.
So it'll be the family member that will be occupied?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Have you talked to your neighbors about it? I'm sure they don't.
Yes, I talked to Eric and then Bess Walker to the side as well. The rest of the neighbors are kind of out of state, most of them.
Any questions for Mr. Bowles?
I don't have any question. Oh, the only thing is, this would remain as an accessory.
That's
dwelling.
correct.
Okay, that was my only question.
You know, I think what you're doing is actually a great way. I think, you know, accessory dwelling units are gonna become more and more needed, especially if people want to have generational transfer of home ownership. So I think it's great that you're doing this. If there's no other discussion or questions for Mr. Bulk, I'm gonna close the public hearing. I think we're good, Mr. Bulk.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak either for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion first on the variance?
Motion to approve the variance.
Motion made by Mr. Souza. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gambrell, second. Discussion?
What a nice thing to do for your kids, and looks like a lot of this just has to do with the way the lot is laid out. That's it. I hope I'm nice enough to give my kids my house someday.
Yeah, I think the relief that he's asking for the variance is strictly because of how the house is situated. It's not, he's not increasing a lot of his coverage, so I'm going to support the variance. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we'll take up the special use permit.
Motion to approve the special use permit.
Motion made by Mr. Souza. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bacon. Discussion?
I think the article that's in question obviously is an age stipulation to develop this as an accessory family property. We can see by this situation that exception is warranted. The requirement that you're asking for is actually in accordance with the article for accessory property. You just don't meet the age limit. So because of that, I'm going to support this.
Any other discussion? I too agree with Mr. Heaney. I think it's something that should be looked at going forward, that maybe we need to address the age 62. So I too am gonna support it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Just remember to mark your calendars that we're meeting on the 21st of April, not April 28th.
6:51.
I know.
Not a record. Pretty good.
No,